Hi everyone, welcome to Deepak Forum, and today we have the last keynote speaker, Mr. Deepak Parekh from Hy-Vee Technologies Incubations. Hi Deepak, how are you doing?
I'm doing awesome. How about you?
Great. This has been 15 hours for us at the DTEC Forum, and it's 7:30 in the morning over here in Malaysia. What time is it over there now for you in India?
5 a.m.
5
Early
a.m.
morning. Yeah.
Nice. Right. So Deepak, without further ado, let's start your presentation.
Sure.
So the topic today that Deepak brought us is about digital agriculture, AI and ML for more efficient farming.
I
Deepak,
hope my screen is visible and I'm loud and clear, right?
loud and clear. The stage is yours.
Thank you. So thanks a lot for inviting me to talk about something which impacts everyone's life. That's food. Food actually comes through farming and agriculture. We all know that. But we have seen that this sector is going through some of the serious challenges. And post-COVID, these challenges become more, I'll say that, immediate, urgent to be tackled. And AI and ML would play a very vital role in feeding the world going forward. So let me first set the context and talk about a little bit of me. So yeah, I'm managing partner of Honeybee, a management consulting company, which works on one side with the farmers. So we partner with the large and small farmers and ensure all the technology we talk about, whether it is artificial intelligence, machine learning, remote sensing, drones, blockchain, all of that is actually implemented on ground to increase yields, financial viability, as well as making agriculture more sustainable on one hand. Similarly, we also work very closely with tech companies. In fact, I have myself founded three companies in agtech domain, Microp, DigiAgri, and AgriChain, all of them working in very specific sectors using AI and ML. First company, Microp, it ensures that farmer use the data from IoT devices to decide when to irrigate, how much to irrigate, when to fertigate. DigiAgri is actually active in climate resilient agriculture by creating algorithms for crop cycle of different type of varieties. And AgriChain is a blockchain startup, so we won't be talking much about that. I have been awarded by World Economic Forum as Technology Pioneer in 2018, Future Agro Challenge supported by United Nations as the top 10 agri-trainers in the world, top 100 social entrepreneur by DBS Foundation and National University of Singapore, as well as for using artificial intelligence for good by the NASSCOM, which is one of the largest IT association in the world. I've worked with thousands of farmers across 20 countries, so that has given me a lot of understanding about this sector. Let's talk a little bit about what Honeybee does. So typically we work with different type of technologies, both in-house as well as we partner with a lot of tech companies from across the world, predominantly from Netherlands, Israel, China, India, and United States. Some of the technology we deploy on field is AI and ML for sure, blockchain, cloud computing, IoT, drones. Idea is to create more crop per drop, per acre, and per dollar to ensure farmer is more productive. We work with different value chain players from banking and financial institutions to agro input companies, commodity buyers, government and development agencies, and for sure farmers. So let's understand what are the challenges we are talking about. So the biggest challenge as a mankind we face today is food security. There were close to 800 million people who used to go to bed without two square meal before COVID. And because of COVID, that number has now increased to a billion. This is what the Food and Agriculture Organization is telling. The challenge is that we would be adding a couple of billion more people by end of this century. Now, to feed them, we need to increase our food production by 60%. But at the same time, we are seeing that climate change is reducing the yields of the farmer by between 8 to 10%. When you see this scenario, you need close to twice the land which we are cultivating today to feed everyone by 2100. Now, that's not possible. So if we do agriculture in current manner, it is not sustainable. And typically, sustainability, you all know that anything which cannot be continued for long is non-sustainable. And that is where today the farming has become. Well, let's understand It's just not about the food security for the masses. It's also about the farmers. So there are typically 1.8 billion people who are directly, indirectly connected to agriculture, and they are very critical for our food security. But they themselves are also under tremendous distress, and that distress is because there is insight vacuum. The cost of cultivation has gone up by 400% over past 2.5 decades. The risk and the financial tool for the farmer is minuscule. No banks want to fund a small farmer, and the insurance is very patchy in most of the countries, and especially 158 developing countries, it is non-existent. Now, if farmer is able to take care of these three challenges, the fourth, when he takes his produce to the market, he doesn't get the price. So the low realization ensures that farmer is not financially sustainable. And that is what we have seen, that we always say agriculture is a sustenance activity. And we have to change that. Until unless we don't do that, we will be seeing a lot of public money going in the wrong direction in subsidizing wrong things. Now, let us understand why we reached this situation, because when we talk about 1960s, farmers were actually profitable farmers. Definitely, they were using bullock carts and they were doing the local trade. Most of the food which was produced was actually used locally within a district or within a province or a state. Now, once we see that we have green revolution where we wanted more production because of the population explosion, we asked farmer to start using fertilizers, pesticide, which increases cost of cultivation, but unfortunately price has not moved up. That also created a lot of challenges going forward because the soil quality also reduced, and these crops were now looking for more water and more resources. Then we had GMO, and then towards the end of the last decade, we had a lot of automation. Now, what is farmer doing today? Today, farmer is confused. Everybody talks about technology, from drones to satellites to cloud computing, IoT, AI and ML. So farmer is confused that actually how I can be capable of using all these technologies. Going forward, we have to understand that what we need to deliver is farming is a solution service to the farmer, where the technology is delivered in a very, very intuitive manner to the farmer rather than throwing all the jargons to him. He need to know that as a farmer, tomorrow morning, what I'm supposed to do. And this is where AI and ML tools can ensure that there is a contextual customized advisory for the farmer so that he can decide what he needs to do tomorrow. So farming need to be both data and demand driven. Second area of activity which is happening in agriculture is where we are talking about controlled environment farming. We know the conventional farming is having its own limitation. We want to cultivate our food closer to our urban capitals. Singapore needs to cultivate food closer to Singapore, or same with Jakarta or Tokyo. Now, to do that, we don't have fields there. So the new concept of hydroponic, aeroponic, which are typically controlled agriculture practices where you grow vertical farms and you are able to produce typically the veggies, vegetables, and fruits very close to the urban centers. We are also seeing the rooftop farming picking up in some of the cities. And finally, because people are now demanding more secure, safer, and nutritional food, there is also a big demand for organic food where actually you don't use fertilizers or pesticide, and that food is safe just out of the farm, you can eat it. Now let's understand that why agriculture is having the challenges which is having today. The reason is that the agriculture is basically aggregate of very complex activities. Agriculture need inputs like seeds, fertilizers, pesticide. So there is a whole value chain which operates there from the factory gate to the farm gate with retailers, distributors, and there is a farm which need to be served, which is always in hundreds of miles from the factories for these input or from the seed production facilities. Now, this value chain also leads to a lot of inefficiencies in the system. The second, the farming activity itself, the crop and the field management is very complex. From the day you sow the seed to you harvest, there are so many activities which are done. And not all the time those activities are efficient, because in majority of the world, farmers are still using practices which they used to use 25 or 30 years back, but the world has changed. And once you harvest, there is another challenge, the food wastage. There is 30 to 35% food loss in perishable, typically fruits and vegetable, from the farm gate to the fork. Now that needs also to be controlled, because that's a criminal waste, because you have already put the water, you have put all the inputs, you have already won the cost, but you are not able to get the economical value out of it because it gets wasted. Now, these are the complex challenges which makes agriculture both inefficient as well as challenging for everyone who are practitioners in this field. But we are also seeing that there is suddenly a humongous explosion of data. We are having a lot of farm management tools who are creating terabytes of data. Then we are having drones, IoT, all of them, they are producing data at the speed of light. So if you see that in agriculture, in last 2.5 years, we have produced more data than what we have produced for whole of our civilization. Similarly, we are also having a lot of data coming from typically the genetic engineering, whether it's a GMO or genetic editing. So a lot of data of sequencing of the DNA of these crops. And we are talking about lakhs of different varieties of crop which are already being sequenced. So there is humongous data there as well. And then definitely we are having a lot of images coming through drones and satellites, which can be processed to add value to the farming activity itself. So if you see that agriculture is already producing humongous data, but unfortunately that data still has not been able to create insight which are valuable. Now, when we say agriculture data, we have to understand that this data is having 5 V's. So first V is, if you can say that, like, we are talking about uh, the volume. So you are creating data which is of huge volume, terabytes of data, from the tractors to the drones to the soil sensors. All of them, they're producing data with every passing minute. Then you are having the value. So that data is actually, until and unless it is not valuable, it is not going to be adding value. Just sorry. Yeah. Second is actually when we are talking about the variety. So if you see that agriculture is producing very simple streams of data, which is typically like, your input output data from the sensor to the images of drones or the handheld devices or the smartphones, which are used for detecting pests and all that. And then this data, which is actually being produced, sometimes it doesn't have value. So we have to also ensure that whatever data is being captured is having value, or there can be insight which can be taken out of it. Otherwise, you'll end up with a lot of data with no value. The velocity of data is also very high because every sensor, if it is pinging every 30 minutes to 35 minutes from close to 5.5 million farms across the world, you're already talking about humongous amount of data. Then again, there is a drone actually which is working on a typically 1 hectare of land, is producing roughly 300 GBs of data. And then the veracity. Now that is very critical, unlike any other sector. If you are not able to verify that data and you end up using wrong data, you will be actually ending up having low yield or no yield, which is very disastrous, because then it will create a situation where you will have stomachs to feed, but you don't have food for them. So that makes agriculture data very critical. Also, the agriculture data for any nation is often in eminent importance, for very simple reason is that actually it can be of national security concern. Any private company which knows that actually, like, we are not having sufficient food to eat, can always inflate the prices. So all those challenges are also there in the system, which needs to be taken care of. So now understand, like, what are the data required. So typically you say that there are broadly, when we talk about data driven decision making in agriculture, one is the public data sources. So typically data regarding the weather and the climate, both the historical data as well as the prediction. Then there are a lot of soil databases which tells about, like, what is the type of soil, whether it's a loamy or clay. So there are typically, like, 53 odd different type of soils. So about that, then the typically crop models, market informations, agri input data sheets. So typically, every pesticide would be having its data sheet, or same with the fertilizers or the seeds. So those data sheets, and the best practices. Now, best practices you have, which are called good agriculture practices, are both at the national level as well as the global level. So again, that is a huge amount of data there as well. And then definitely the farmer information about his demographic profile, about what he has been growing, what are the seasons he has been taking care of. And when you use this public data source, along with the proprietary data and the sensors, so typically, like, soil, weather, and crop sensors, or like, the variety and yield databases, then the private inventories, all this data, when it goes to decision models and evaluators and algorithms, then you create insight. So whether it is integrated farm models or crop growth model or water balance model. So these are typically, like, all the models which are used in, which are called DSAT, decision support tools, which are adding data from both public and private source, and then creating insight using typically machine learning or AI models. So if you see AI and ML architecture in agriculture, so from one you are having typically the farm data, which are, as I told you, IoT, satellite, or drone data. Then there is a public data, which is generally in public cloud. Then you are having proxy data. So sometimes you might not be having the exact data you want, but you might be having a data which can infer to that data. That is also again in both public and private domain. And then the transaction data. The transaction data is increasing with every passing day because more and more people are looking for traceability. And then we also want our agriculture trade to be fair, as well as the food security is becoming concern. So a lot of data is also being produced through creating value chain on blockchain. Now, all of that data typically goes in the data lakes, which are typically big data environment, and either they themselves are able to create actionable insight, or using AI and ML engines, you are able to create that valuable insight, which is used by the farmers or the value chain players to ensure that agriculture practices are more efficient. Typically, all the three modes of AI are used in agriculture. So typically, when you want to just simply detect a pest, typically with a photograph, you're using in normal parlance what is called artificial intelligence. But you want a little bit of more complex, where actually you want to predict the pest. So where you use both the imaging to identify if the pest was detected there, as well as you use the typically the temperature, the moisture, and all that data. Then it needs a little bit of feedback loop, and for those predictive models you need machine learning. And finally, if you want to give recommendation to the farmer, telling him that based on what we have seen in typically, like, the stress on the crop, the changing environmental patterns, how much water he has already put in. So if you put all that data, and you want to tell farmer in very simple language, right, which he understand, then you also have typically the deep learning models. So deep learning models are now very common also to work on the climate resilient agriculture, because you also have to predict weather with I'll say that very granularity, and ensure that those data can be used to advise farmer before the event rather than post event, which is post-mortem rather than actually adding any value. So we are seeing a lot of deep learning based models also being used in agriculture. So let me talk a little bit about, like, some use cases of typically like digital agriculture, which includes typically big data, AI, and ML. So one is crop and farm monitoring. So if you see that company like Cropin or ITK, they have these typically like smart farm or smart risk model, or typically Cropin for ITK, where they collect data from satellites, where they collect data from ground, and using that, they are able to actually monitor the farm. They can tell whether there is a stress on the crop or not, and based on that, they can also suggest what would be the yields. Now that becomes very critical when you're financing a farmer, because now you can basically pre-hand understand whether this farmer will be profitable after the end of the season or not. And based on that, you can decide whether to fund him or not. Similarly, ITK is working for on simulation also. So before even sowing the seed, you can decide, in case I am using this variety, what would be my yields after the end of the season. So very insightful way of doing crop and farm monitoring. One of the company I founded, DigitalWeek, also is doing that by using on-ground activities to find what would be the yields and how the farmer would be able to be more financially sustainable. Then second is the pest and soil defect detection. So here you generally typically use either computer vision, or you use image processing by taking photograph of the leaf, or like, the complete farm, or using drone or satellite based NDVI indexes, which are again put across to the typically AI and ML models to find whether the crop is having stress or not. And the best example for that would be Zavio and Plantix. So typically Zavio is having a scout of application where you take photographs, and based on that photographs, they are able to like identify close to 400 different diseases and pests with close to 90 to 100% certainty. And based on that, they can advise what should be the activity. Same is with Plantix. So Plantix is actually, it's more of a crowdsource of data, where they're having the farmers which act as a community, and all those farmers keep on adding photographs of their crop and the diseases. And if they have false positive or false negative, the model automatically recalibrates itself. So Plantix is again is another company which is doing that. Then we talk about the farm automation. So farm automation typically, like, the best two example would be Aero Farms and Blue River. Aero Farm is more of a control environment farming, so they are into vertical farms, and they are having tool to identify if the crop is growing well. In case it is not having right nutrients, automatically pumps triggers in, right formulation is put into it, and your crop actually start getting the nutrients. Similarly, it is able to predict if there is a possibility of any pest, and that it changes the parameters of the control environment or the glass house or a greenhouse, so that actually those pests initiation itself is disrupted. Blue River is actually another very interesting farm automation tool where weeding is a big problem in agriculture, where like removing one weed, right? You need to put farm labor, and it's very cumbersome, and I'll say that very challenging activity. Or you spray weedicide across the field, which is another way of like putting more chemical both in soil as well as in your food. Blue River has come out with a very innovative solution where it scan and spray. So basically, you are having typically robots which move, identify if a plant is a weed or not, and only spray on that plant. So it won't be spraying anywhere else except if it is able to detect a weed. So they use computer vision as well as a lot of ML models to find, spot, and then decide whether to spray or not. And finally, we come to like the last two use cases which are interrelated, which is predictive analytics, and based on those predictive analytics, the recommendation engine. So here you can talk about two awesome companies. One is OneSoil. So OneSoil is a Belarus-based company which has actually like digitized using satellite imagery large farms across the world. So from Europe to America, they have actually used satellite-based imagery to like identify what is being grown on the farm, what is typically the boundaries of the farm, what is the vegetative index, is the crop growing fine or not. So they typically use like eyes in the sky for the predictive analytics, and then based on that, recommending what farmers should be doing. Phytech is more on like ground basis activity. So Phytech actually puts sensors on the plant itself. So here you are having 360-degree understanding of what's happening to your plant, and based on that, actually you are able to decide what needs to be done, and the advisory is given to the farmer. And in this play, actually, MacRop also works where it puts a lot of sensors on ground to understand the soil, and based on that, they are able to identify and tell what nutrients need to be put, or like whether irrigation needs to be done or not. It also calibrates that data with satellite-based data to identify in case there is a stress in the crop or not. So broadly, you'll find that these are the few use cases where AI and ML has been very successful in solving farmers' challenges, at the same time ensuring there is a less of food waste and ensuring farmers are more profitable. And if you see that the opportunity part of it, so typically food and agriculture business is typically $5 trillion economy, which is growing at rate of around 5% on year-to-year basis. Smart agriculture is a sub part of it, with close to 250 billion US dollars as the market size. And when we come to digital agriculture, which includes again the big data, AI, and ML, is close to 9 billion currently, and it's the fastest growing sector in technology with growth of 20% on year basis. So with that, I would like to end my intervention. I'm open for the questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deepak. Great examples and use case of the technology of artificial intelligence and machine learning. And I can see that you have been involved a lot in the agricultural tech as well. You have a good understanding of how to implement it. I think one of the questions that we always have concern is that the cost of implementing of this sort of system in agriculture, how does it make sense, and would it be expanding the return on investment? And if it's privatized project, obviously it's almost impossible to get the farmers to invest in this sort of equipments and whatnot. So how do you guys resolve this sort of challenges?
Yeah, so if you see, like, luckily I had opportunity in working in your country also with the palm industry. So challenge is that actually, like, agriculture is a sustenance activity as such also. Whether even if you keep technology out of it, still farmer need to be subsidized because their like, cost of sale is always lower than their cost of production. So even countries like US, like, they are having close to like, 200 to 300% subsidies being given to the farmer. Or for example, Germany, like, they're subsidizing their wheat or India, like, we have to give subsidies, and that's also happening, like, whether it's Indonesia, Malaysia, or Thailand. So challenge is that we are already, like, the governments or the development agencies are there already giving subsidies. Now, how do you reduce those subsidies? You can reduce those subsidies by making farming more efficient, more effective, and ensuring that you are having higher yields. And if instead of giving that subsidy, or I say that keep on giving that subsidy, if you just put 5% in technology, you'll over the next 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, your subsidy cost will go down because actually your productivity has increased. So it's like, it's a cycle. I say that positive cycle where you more you put in technology. So typically in our case, what we do is that, like, we look towards the government, because government end up paying $16 to $20 per annum per farmer for technology upgradation or improvement. And I was pleasantly surprised that most of the developing world where I'm interacting, right, and I found that all the governments are very open to invest in technology, because they also understand that otherwise they'll keep on draining their money in subsidies to farmers without making them efficient. So yes, again, like, we need more investors also to get into it. And luckily, like, countries like Indonesia, Malaysia, and India, especially Southeast Asia, there is a lot of interest by investor communities also. And, like, billions of dollars are getting into agriculture already. Even Singapore, like, a lot of funding happens, right, in agriculture domain in ASEANs. So, and even China, like, there is, like, you see that, like, close to $4.5 billion were put in just ag tech last year. So there is already investment also coming in, and people are understanding the value of it.
Great. Thank you very much, Deepak, for sharing this. I have no questions. Pretty much I understood what you were talking about, and I'm pretty impressed with the work you're doing there. Look forward to hear more updates and development on your side. And yeah, thank you very much for speaking
Yes.
at the forum.
Thanks a lot for inviting me, and it's always a pleasure talking about agriculture and connecting it with deep tech. Thank you.
Thank you. And audiences, ladies and gentlemen, this concludes the last session of the DTAC forum. And again, a round of applause to the whole team working on DTAC forum, and also the Digital Week Online team, Juliet, Ivan, Sergey, and the whole team that gave us so much support for this event to be a successful event. Thank you very much. And see you guys in the next DTAC forum.
Yes, for sure, Rico. Thank you personally to your passion, to your ability to be so long with us. I'm really a little bit get tired. I think you too. Digital Week Online continues, and tomorrow we see all of you again. Thanks a lot to all of you. See you guys.
Yeah.